welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
And greetings. Thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And I would like so much for you to get in touch with us. You can visit us at naturalnurse.com or Facebook, The Natural Nurse, and you can join us online or on ground for our many classes and workshops. So we have things actually where you can come and be with us in person at lectures, seminars, herb walks, herb workshops all over the area and the country. You can check online at naturalnurse.com calendar for when our lectures are coming up, but we have lots and lots of stuff online. For instance, if you're interested in incorporating natural medicine into your professional life, we have specific classes in that called Career Paths in Natural Health. We also have sort of a system where you can become a registered herbalist, and that's a walk through the American Herbalist Guild. So there's a lot of things to learn. Go to naturalnurse.com. And today we're so happy to have as our guest Felicia Stoler. And she is a registered dietitian nutritionist, exercise physiologist, and expert consultant in disease prevention, wellness, and healthful living. She earned her Master's of Science degree in Applied Physiology and Nutrition from Columbia University and her doctorate in clinical nutrition from Rutgers School of Health Professionals. I am also an alumni of Rutgers. She completed her residency at Rutgers University Athletics and also worked in the ABC News Medical Unit. She has served as a lecturer, and she also teaches physiology, nutrition, and communication. And she is the author of a lot of books, including Living Skinny in Fat Genes. That was a big seller and still is. And on today's show, we're going to talk about misconceptions about healthy eating with Felicia Stoler, who is certainly an expert in that topic. So thank you so much for joining us today, Felicia.
Oh, my pleasure for being here. Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get started, I want people to know that today's show is also archived, so if they want to listen to it in the future, or they loved it and they want to tell their friends, or they want to download it, whatever. But how can people find you beyond listening to you here on Herbally Yours?
Sure. I have a website, feliciastoler.com, and I'm on all social media as Felicia Stoler.
Well, that makes it easier, so they can just Google your name and you'll pop up all over the place. Now, how did you begin in your personal path to becoming a registered dietitian and all the various degrees that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that a lot. I used to work in news, doing licensing for ABC News in New York, and I realized that a lot of people would, this is sort of before the days of the internet where people would want to get a copy of something that they saw on TV. And so it would be something on a morning show or a news magazine show or the evening news. And I noticed that people really liked the health segments the most, and I realized the power of the visual medium and the power of broadcasting. And I was considering getting a master's in journalism, and I spoke with the woman at ABC who hired all the producers and on-air anchors, and I said to her, I'm thinking about getting a master's in journalism, and she said, there are a dime a dozen around here. Felicia, why don't you go to school for something you're really passionate about and see if you can't work that back into media? And that's exactly what I did. So I had gone to a dietitian and exercise physiologist myself after getting bad advice from the trainers at the gym, and she changed my life, and I called her up and I said, where did you go to school? I want to be you. And she said she went to Columbia. I looked into the program at Teachers College, and I was very intimidated by the level of science, and somebody there was so gracious and invited me to literally come and sit in on some classes, and I loved it. And then I applied, and I got in, and I worked full-time at ABC News, and I went to school full-time at night at Columbia, and that included having to do about 5 or 6 extra classes to complete all the science prerequisites that I did not have for my undergraduate degree. So that's why I get really crazy when people try to take shortcuts in their education, because I worked really hard to get to where I am, and you know, and for me, it's about getting the best education and the best training so that I'm not doing any harm to anybody.
You know, it is so true. And that's why, you know, that's the only problem I have with something called health coach, because people can get a health coach certificate over online or in a weekend, and that is not the same thing as an RD, registered dietitian. And I am very inspired by that story. I never heard you tell that story before, Felicia, but it means a lot, because one of the big things I do is called career counseling in natural health. If somebody wants to do like what you're doing, which is make their livelihood focused on health, and in particular, you're doing a lot with nutrition. So it's so wonderful that you really did not take shortcuts, and you truly are not only an RD, but that you've taken so many other great courses. And that's a lot. Putting your nose to the grind, you were already an adult, you already had a good career.
I already had children, too. I mean,
and you had children. Did you ever see them in those years?
I did. Well, I'll tell you, one thing that was really funny, especially when my daughter was born, that's when I eventually stopped working at ABC. But, you know, when you have this newborn and you're nursing them all night and you're rocking them, it's a great time to study your homework. And I would read things out loud that I was trying to study, because it didn't matter what I was reading to my child. I didn't have to read to her out of a little, like, infant book, you know, or a book for toddlers, or a book about nursery rhymes. I could read my nutritional biochemistry to her, and as long as she heard my voice, she heard my voice, you know. So
what a great mothering tip. I love that.
And I'll give you another bit of information. As an exercise physiologist, I also worked as a personal trainer for a while, and I was teaching trainers how to be trainers. And at a period of time after my son was born, so he was my second child, I went to the local county park system, and I developed a program for them, and I was teaching a new mommy stroller class at a local county park so that I could get other moms and myself out with your kids in the stroller. And I was not only getting everybody out sort of trotting and skipping and walking, but then I was showing them how to use their baby for resistance exercise, so that it was like a total mommy baby workout.
Wow, that is fantastic, because you are incorporating healthy living. Instead of people having an excuse to not do healthy living, you're saying why, no matter where you're at and what your circumstances are in that moment, there's a way to incorporate it into your life, and even the learning perspective. Now, I would be interested to know what happens with your daughter. She may have a very interesting attraction to biomedicine later in life.
Well, you know, she's 20. She's going to be 21 this year, and she attends Rowan University, and she's studying communications and journalism. And you know, she has been interested in health. She feels like she's got the nutrition education, or the science education by just from like living in my house and hearing me for so many years.
That is probably actually true. And I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse. And my guest today is wonderful, knowledgeable nutritionist. And she also has a great book. Her name is Felicia Stoler, and you can find her online. And Felicia, let's go into some interesting things about your topic for today, which is food, fact, or scare tactics. Some things people just hear on, wherever, social media or news clips, really isn't true. So let's talk about some of these things. How about vitamin C? A lot of people are taking extra vitamin C these days in case they have, a cold or flu.
Well, I like to remind people that Americans have the most expensive urine in the world. We take lots of things that get peed out of our system, and vitamin C is one of them because it's a water-soluble vitamin. I mean, I'm not going to discount its value in, with helping to reduce the time that somebody has a cold, but, taking excessive amounts of it means you're just going to see it, within an hour later whenever you go to the bathroom. But the benefit, though, of vitamin C in terms of ascorbic acid is that it's a really potent antioxidant, and it's sometimes used to increase the shelf life or act as a preservative for lots of foods. So people will see ascorbic acid, on a label, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's acid in there." And I'm like, "No, it's just vitamin C." So, when you're looking at it, I always say to folks, "Well, what do you do with an apple if you don't want it to turn brown? You put lemon juice on it. What do we put in guacamole so that it doesn't turn brown? And oxidize. When the air touches it, we put a lot of times lime juice in there. So we use that in a lot of recipes and dishes as is. If you, just as a preservative, when people eat things like ceviche, that is a process where you're sort of like more or less cooking fish with acid. So again, using lime juice, lemon juice, sometimes grapefruit juice, like using citrus as a way to sort of, in an acid way, cook food is something that, is out there.
So seeing that word ascorbic acid on a label you don't feel is worrisome?
Correct. I don't think people need to be concerned about that.
I actually agree with you, and there's a lot of good science in terms of them using the ascorbic acid part of vitamin C, but some of the more natural vitamins feature something else, let's say camu powder or acerola powder, that is really a fruit-derived dried powder rather than the chemically produced ascorbic acid. And one of the concerns is that it's often made from genetically modified corn, which in fact it probably is, well, the commercial varieties. However, I still think, especially for the cost and the fact that it actually has been scientifically studied, that it's actually a fine choice and, not something to really worry about. I totally agree with you. Now, what about carrageenan? Because again, that has been getting a bad rap.
Well, it's actually pronounced carrageenan, and it is produced from red seaweed. So when you think about an ingredient and where it comes from, it is sustainably produced by red seaweed. And so it's basically a sea vegetable that we know that it may help to lower cholesterol, may help to reduce the time that people have colds. Believe it or not, they're looking at some clinical trials right now suggesting that it may play a role in reducing inflammation and fighting colds and viruses, which is really fantastic. But where it is found very often is in things like yogurt, ice cream, sour cream, cottage cheese, some infant formulas, and some coffee beverages and creamers have it in there as well. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine who's Irish, she said, "Oh my gosh, carrageenan, they call that Irish moss." It was actually used to help grow potatoes in areas where the soil is very rocky in Ireland. So, you think about things that humans have used and helped for maybe agricultural purposes, or they eat it for other purposes, and eat that. When you pull an ingredient out of a whole food and use it for something else, it doesn't mean it's bad.
That's true. And again, are there different forms of carrageenan? Because I know what you're talking about, and in natural medicine, even when I started in herbal medicine in 1964, we didn't use that word. We used the word Irish moss, which was often used as a thickening agent in puddings and in soups and stews. But is that the same as the carrageenan that's often used now as a thickening agent commercially?
Yes, it is. It is. So that's the whole point, is that it is. It's not something else. So, I guess Irish moss is technically, it's the actual ingredient within the Irish moss, or what's being pulled out to use as the ingredient from the moss versus using the whole
so you see
plant.
no alarm with that, and that's really good to know.
Right. Well, the problem is that some people are getting confused with the term polygenin, which is a degraded form of carrageenan, which is, there's one individual and one group that was really waging a whole war and campaign against it, and it has since been, not proven by any form of science at all. And so, this is where I get a little concerned when, you have organizations that are trying to go out and take what is, a decent food product or ingredient and trying to turn it into something bad because they have their own political or financial interests. And
right. Maybe they're selling the competitive product. That's very true.
Right,
so we're going to take a little break right here,
Mm-hmm.
Felicia, and thank you. Mm-hmm. Listeners, I want to remind you you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio. For more information on today's guest or topic, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Stay tuned. Herbally Yours will be right back.
Welcome back to the Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, tail-wagging, backyard-hanging, and, of course, companionship.
And what breed would you say Satchmo is?
I'd have to go with maybe a lavish terrier-hound chihuahua-looking kind of mix.
Tremendous dog.
I'd also like to point out Satchmo's coloring, a white, gray, brown, black brindle, simply marvelous.
It's such a treat to watch a dog like this.
Now, let's see him in action.
Look how he makes eye contact with his person.
That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive. And now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
Ah, the happy dance, so common with this group.
And finally, the loving face lick.
It's great how he just gets in there and, licks.
Fantastic. But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
And welcome back once again to Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College. Today we're so happy to have Felicia Stoler as our guest, and she is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, exercise physiologist, and America's health expert. And as you can see, she has deeply studied all of these topics and has wonderful information for us today. And we're talking about food, fact, or scare tactics. Some of the things you might have heard either peripherally or in your health food store. And she digs down through the smear campaigns and finds the truth, which she's sharing with us today. So another big one that, seems to keep going back and forth is palm oil. What's the story about that? And is there a difference, for instance, between red organic palm oil and more processed palm oil?
Well, let's start with the fact that there's no GMO palm oil. So it is, and depending on, the country, most places it is grown organically. The issue, there's a few issues that have gone on with palm oil. One is that it is a saturated fat. So people thought, oh my gosh, it's absolutely awful. We shouldn't have any saturated fats in the diet. We should not have trans fats in the diet. And actually, palm oil has been a really wonderful replacement for trans fats in terms of foods that it's used in. It is used in a lot of shelf-stable foods. It's used in chocolates and things like Nutella, Smart Balance brand. Many bars like Luna bars have it in there, and lots of other products have it in there. It is a tropical oil. There are some amazing health properties because it has beta carotene, so it's orange in color, and it also has tocotrienols, which is a form of vitamin E that is also maybe cardio and neuroprotective. There's been a lot of research done with that. So, when you sort of look at what an oil is and whether or not it's good or bad, some of the controversy with it beyond the saturated fat has been by organizations that think it's not sustainably produced. Some countries where it's produced, like in Indonesia, they are not necessarily growing it sustainably, and they've done some things in that country that have sort of like ravaged their rainforests. But in other countries, like in Malaysia, and I know in certain other parts of the world where it is grown sustainably, it's grown safely, and it's been a really great product and source of revenue and jobs for lots of countries. So, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I know that it's also helpful with preventing, the blindness that's associated with vitamin deficiency. So, again, we have to get politics out of some of the equation here and sort of look at what the fat is, the oil is, what it's being used for, and how much of it are we actually having in our diet? Because the truth is, it's a very expensive oil. So nobody's using it in a wasteful manner.
Well, I know I have it right on my counter, and what I have it is in a glass jar, and it's very red, and
yes.
Can be very full of other kinds of polyphenols and antioxidants, and you use very little when you use it. You don't go through a jar a week. I mean, mine probably lasts just for me about 6 months.
Actually, one of our favorite things to make with it is popcorn. You actually, if you want to do it like popcorn with a little bit of oil in a pan because of the flavor of it, it's got like sort of like a buttery neutral flavor to it. It's really nice. I really like using it. So
I do too. And you talked about, that it's actually some great science behind it, such as with vitamin A. So interesting that people actually are not aware of that. And I want to remind you that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse. And my guest today is Felicia Stoler, registered dietitian, and lots more letters past her name. And she's also the author of Living Skinny in Fat Genes. What a great name for that book. How did you come up with that name, Felicia?
Well, I came up with it because people are always blaming their genes for why they think they're overweight, and why they're fat. And I tell a cute story in the book about someone sitting across from their doctor saying, "Hey, doc, fat genes run in my family." And the doctor's response is, "No, nobody in your family runs." So, now we have things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com where you can actually get your health genetic profile analyzed, and you can obtain some very interesting information. And when I did mine, I found out that my genetic makeup included being of what they called, normal weight or average weight, that I wasn't going to be too thin, I wasn't going to be overweight. So I then called all the people in my family that were overweight, and I said, "Hey, it's not in our genes. It's your lifestyle."
And so often that's true. And I'll just throw out my husband, because my husband's a great example. He's Italian, and everybody in his family, of course, this isn't racist, it's just true. They eat a lot of pasta and bread. At least they all did in his family. And everybody was overweight, and his mother thought that was a sign of health. Like, she liked to feed everybody, which was very loving of her. But when he was 16 and started to get interested in girls, he was like, "Gee, I'm too heavy." So he started reading in nutrition and learned for the first time that what you eat actually influences how much fat you have on your body. That was not even taught in mainstream life. And he changed his diet. His mother was upset, no pasta for dinner, vegetables and meat. And to this day, he's 73 years old, and he weighs 165 pounds, and he's in beautiful shape.
That's great.
So that's a story of, genes over taking advantage of knowledge that you have.
Right, but how could he not, when he's married to you and he gets all the great information from you too, right?
Well, I won't take that credit because he did this long before we met. Now, here's another one I'd love for you to review, Felicia, because there's a lot of back and forth about eggs. Everything from eating eggs, causes every disease possible, to the fact that they're loaded with choline and a really healthy food. What do you think?
I love eggs. I eat eggs almost every day. It is my go-to source of protein because I'm more flexitarian, which means I eat predominantly plant-sourced foods and small amounts of animal-sourced protein. So when I want to make sure I have some, complete protein, I do just grab the incredible edible egg. But, people were concerned about its cholesterol levels many years ago. And, that was in the 60s, and it's been debunked in the 80s, and yet you still hear people talking about cholesterol in eggs. And I'm like, hey, folks, there's cholesterol in turkey and chicken and beef. Anything that comes from an animal has cholesterol. And then some people just want to eat the egg whites and not the yolk. And then I have to remind them, like you were talking about the choline there, and lutein and zeaxanthin, they're all in the yolk. And that's where the essential fatty acids are also in the yolk. It's a good source of B12. And so, again, like you think about it, it's a perfect form of protein. In fact, all other proteins, when their amino acid quality is being measured, it is being compared to that of an egg.
I have to say, Felicia, we're on the exact same page because my diet is the same. It is really mostly vegetable based, and then I have some animal products. And one that I do use all the time are free-range organic eggs. And what I do is I hard boil a whole dozen, and then they're in my grab-and-go bag in the morning. I always take healthy food with me on the road, and that's definitely one of the standbys.
That's exactly it. I do the exact same thing every Sunday. I hard boil about 6 eggs. So just so people know, fresh eggs sometimes are a little bit more difficult to peel. I had learned this. I had asked somebody, and they said actually eggs that are not like quite the freshest, that if you even keep fresh eggs in your fridge for a week or two and then hard boil them, you're better off. They'll peel easier.
Oh, you're right. You get those little things that they stick to it, and it has little eggshells on the outside. I know just what you mean. Right. So we're very much on the same page, and you're such a pleasure to have as our guest. We are getting to the end of our show today, so just please tell everybody once again how they can find you, your books, and your great information.
Sure, right. You can just go to FeliciaStoler.com, and there are links to a new blog that I have that I need to add some more content to, and all my social media links are there, and there's a link to my book as well that people can get on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com.
Well, thank you so much, and happy travels. I know you're traveling now. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.